Everybody wants to go to heaven. Everybody wants to go to heaven.
You tell them I'm on my way.
But nobody.
Tell them I'm on my way. I keep my mind on
In Mafia 3, you play as the Punisher. Releasing 6 years after Mafia 2, Mafia 3 was one of the biggest disappointments of my lifetime. I honestly thought there was no way this game could be anything less than good. Set in the 1960s in New Orleans, one of my favorite eras and one of my favorite cities, I kinda just assumed they'd take everything we loved about the first two games and crank it up to 11 for a whole new console generation. And what exactly did I and everybody else love so much about the first two games, you ask? Well, of course we loved the tight, well-written stories that cut out all the fat, the authentic period setting, their commitment to being as realistic as was realistic at the time, and of course the cutting-edge graphics. So Mafia 3 said, oh, okay, so yeah, we don't really need to do any of that. Everything people loved about the first two games is either severely dumbed down or just completely stripped away, and nowhere is this more obvious than in the mission structure itself. Mafia and Mafia 2 were both set in open-world cities, but the open world only served as a backdrop to flesh out the setting. The structure of those games was completely linear. They had you going through story missions in a specific order, more like a Naughty Dog game and less like a Ubisoft game. But Mafia 3 says fuck all that, Grandpa, and goes with an extremely formulaic Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Ubisoft structure for its missions, where instead of well-written, tightly curated story chapters, you just go around an open map and take down enemy operations. And I couldn't believe it when I first started this game. It opens incredibly strong with this first mission, but then you start getting objectives. And initially I was like, oh, okay, I have to go around this section of the map and take down these operations before I can start the next story mission. Okay, I can do that. Okay, now I'm done with that. Okay, well, what's this? The same thing in a different part of the city? Okay, well, that's kind of weird, but yeah, I'll go do it real quick because I'm really eager for the actual game to start. Okay, I have to do it again now. Well, this is starting to feel tedious, but hey, some of my favorite games are slow and tedious in the first couple hours, so let's just get through this part. Oh, wait, I have to do it again? Oh, I see. This is the whole thing. Yeah, yeah, this is the entire game. And it was the entire game. You go to a district and someone tells you to take down a bunch of operations in that part of town, which means you go somewhere to either kill someone, interrogate someone, destroy something, or steal something, and really they're all exactly the same thing. You pull up, murder everybody, then go in and hold one button. Kill someone, that means go up to them and hold one button. Interrogate someone, go up to them and hold one button. Destroy something, go up to it and hold one button. Steal something, go up to it and hold one button. Then once you've done that, you have to kill two underbosses by going up to them and holding one button. You can't just kill them like with a gun. You have to shoot them a couple times to incapacitate them, then they become invincible. Until you walk over to them and hold one button, then that kills them. Then after that, you go and kill the big boss of that district. Then you own the district. Then you repeat this process over and over, then the game ends. And you're probably thinking, oh, okay, so it's got kind of a bland, repetitive gameplay loop, but hey, you said it's set in New Orleans, right? So what, you're probably going around to a bunch of fun New Orleans set pieces, right? Like sneaking around a creepy village in the bayou late at night, or going through one of those famous cemeteries, or some crazy shit on one of those classic New Orleans steamboats, or some epic car chases down Bourbon Street, right? Yeah, there's definitely some of that, don't get me wrong, but most of your time will be spent exploring the city's incredibly drab collection of docks, warehouses, and back alleys. And on the rare occasion that there is a fun location, the game will have you going back to it a couple times until it loses all intrigue. But the whole reason you're grinding these side missions is to build up to a story mission, and these story missions should theoretically be a lot more engaging and varied than the rest of the game. However, they're basically the exact same thing. Just go somewhere and shoot everybody, then hold one button, but this time it's in a fun set piece and ends with a cutscene. The only one of these missions I found somewhat interesting and different enough to actually care about was the Kill Olivia Marcano mission. You sneak into this funeral dressed as a waiter, and you have to go around serving everybody wine that you've spiked with military-grade LSD so as to create a distraction allowing you to sneak past the guards and the guests. You go around the party, you listen into people's conversations, but when the drugs kick in, they all start taking off their clothes and dancing, getting emotional, crying, seeing the universe, you know how it is. But my favorite is the piano player. When the drugs hit him, instead of getting up or doing anything, he just stays at his post and starts playing a piano rendition of White Rabbit, which you'll totally miss if you aren't paying close attention. Sprinkling little details like this around your game is a major reason why people fell in love with the first two. It doesn't seem like much, but it makes the world feel so much more alive. Not to mention this is a kick-ass rendition of the song in its own right. Unfortunately, this is basically the only mission where you have to do something cool in order to get to the person you need to kill. Every single other one is just go to the place, shoot all the guards, then kill the guy. And these story missions might seem fun, and they are, compared to what you spend most of the game doing. But compare these to the missions in these games where you have to kill a major character, right? Mafia 1, take for example the mission where you have to kill Sergio. You go to his house, sneak around his guards, plant a bomb on his car, whoops, innocent person got in the car. Turns out Sergio's at a diner, you race down there, meet up with Polly and Sam, get in a shootout at the diner, Sergio escapes, you have to chase him through the city on a motorcycle, all the way down to the docks, fight your way through his guys there, then smash open these doors with a train car, shoot your way through the rest of the guys, then finally get to Sergio. Or Mafia 2, when you go to kill Don Clemente, you and Joe drive to the hotel, dress as janitors, put on a silly mustache, go up to the conference room, do janitor stuff while Joe plants the bomb, get on the roof, murder everyone up there, get on the window washing platform, lower yourselves down, pretend to wash windows, whoops, the bomb went off early and Clemente escapes, so you have to shoot your way out of the building, through the parking lot, then chase him through the city and finally take him down. So now in contrast, let's look at the missions in Mafia 3 where you have to kill major characters. Okay, kill Tony DeRazio, go to his hotel, kill all his guards, then kill him. Lou Marcano, stop his boat, kill all his guys, then kill him. Richie Doucette, aka Jonah Hill, go to his theme park, kill all his guys, then kill him. Remy Duval, go to his thing, kill all his guys, then kill him. You get the fucking point. And yes, they do shake things up a tiny bit every now and then, but even the final mission in the game is like this. Go to the casino, kill everyone, then kill Sal and Georgie. This is the game. This is the entire game. Drive to a location, kill everybody, then hold one button. Congratulations, now do it again and again and again and again. Good job, the game's over now. I should mention that the DLC chapters do avoid a lot of these mistakes, and they're way more fun minute to minute. Even if some of them feel a bit out of place, at least you're going through a fun, curated story mission like in the first two games. Okay, so the structure of this game sucks, and it feels like an insult to everything the first two games were trying to accomplish, but hey, the game also doesn't work most of the time. In trying to copy the Ubisoft formula, they also seem to have copied the Ubisoft tradition of releasing every game as a buggy, broken piece of garbage. Even after 5 years of patches, even after the release of the so-called Definitive Edition, Mafia 3 is still broken. Now, when I first played this game, it was on the Xbox One, and it looked like shit, horrible smudgy textures and bad lighting, and the frame rate was like 1, and it would crash about every hour or so. When I finally played it on the PS5, a lot of those problems were gone. Like, it just no longer felt like the game was about to explode at any second, but a lot of the problems weren't gone. There's this super common bug where you often won't be able to start a mission because the game won't let you talk to the person you need to talk to start it. I also had this thing where after I'd take down a racket, it would cut to the outside of the building and show my guys pulling up, but then it wouldn't give camera control back to me. It would just stay at the fixed camera angle from outside the building. I could still see and control my guy, but I couldn't move outside of the camera view. So I'd have to close and restart the game every single time this happened. The worst bug I encountered was after a cutscene once, the game just cut to a black screen, and then it never loaded into the game. So I restarted the game, and it showed the loading screen, and then cut to the black screen, and it just wouldn't load into the game. I tried everything. I left it loading for hours. I restarted my console, I uninstalled and reinstalled the game, nothing worked. The game just wouldn't let me play for like 2 days, which, I mean, that's great. Despite this egregious, literally game-breaking bug, the worst aspect of this game's technical performance is just how poorly optimized it is, even if there were 0 bugs. Textures and full assets are constantly popping in, sometimes right in front of you. Also, if you drive too fast, cars won't load into the environment, making the world feel incredibly empty and desolate. Sometimes you can even see the polygons on your character model. But the lighting is really the worst thing ever. Every second of this game, the lighting feels like it's constantly adjusting. Always feels like it's trying to catch up with what the player's doing, but never quite gets there. Sometimes the lighting's super bright at night. Sometimes I can't quite tell if it's daytime or nighttime. Sometimes you walk out of a building and everything's super overexposed and you can't see. Sometimes you walk into a building and everything's super underexposed and you can't see. I mean, I can tolerate bad or boring lighting in a game, but the way it's constantly adjusting itself just reminds you every second that you're playing a video game and fully destroys any sense of immersion. And people have made lighting mods for this game which make all the difference in the world to how it looks. Maybe if they do a re-release, they'll improve the lighting, maybe... Oh wait, no, this is the re-release, and they didn't do fucking shit to fix anything. Honestly, if you're looking for a good laugh, after dropping a like on this video and subscribing to my channel, go look up a Mafia and 3 Bugs and Glitches compilation. It's some good shit. The AI is also incredible.
I'm Lincoln Clay, and I pay the bills around here. The real person you want to thank.
Enemies will not notice you unless you're right in front of their face, sometimes not even then. Also, sometimes if you commit a crime in the middle of the street and someone's driving by, they usually just decide to stop and get out of their car and stand there or maybe try to run away on foot. But the best thing about the AI in this game is when you're driving around the city, about every couple minutes or so, a pedestrian will desperately hurl themselves in front of your car and die.
The midweek call.
Pull around to the chum shack in the...
It happens all the time, and of course it always causes someone to call the cops on you, but this actually isn't a big problem like it was in the first 2 games. One of the most iconic features of the Mafia franchise is the police. While cops in games like GTA and Watch Dogs will only notice you if you murder someone, but they won't bother you if you're driving crazy or just walking down the street with a rocket launcher or something, Mafia set itself above these games by trying to incorporate a realistic police response, meaning the police would come after you for breaking any laws at all. Speeding, running red lights, even driving on the wrong side of the road. And Mafia 2 took this even further, in that if you can manage to escape the cops, they'll still keep an eye out for you and your car, so you have to change clothes and change cars in order to be completely safe from the cops. And I was really excited to see how Mafia 3 took this wanted system even further. Turns out they didn't. Cops no longer care at all if you violate traffic laws. You can drive like a madman right past them at 100 miles an hour and they won't bat an eye. If you commit a crime in the street, they establish a very small search area for you, about 2 blocks wide, and as long as you can manage to make it outside of the search area before the cops get there, they won't be able to find you. Meaning if you're driving down the street and you kill someone, yes, the cops will come, but it's very, very likely that you'll be long gone before they get there. Even if you're in a big car chase with them, if you manage to get out of their line of sight for even a second, they'll lose track of you and no longer recognize you or the car they've been chasing through the city for the past 30 minutes. Yeah, I think I saw him go that way, officers. Yeah, good luck to you. Out of every terrible issue Mafia 3 has, the utter nerfing of the police system is the biggest slap in the face to everything the original game was trying to do. I honestly don't have much to say about the combat. It's really good. The shooting feels really satisfying. I'd consider it better than most third-person open-world games like GTA or Watch Dogs. Plus, the executions are fucking badass, especially if you're using a shotgun. Basically, you should just use the shotgun this whole time, as Nakey Jakey put it.
I love kicking open doors with a shotgun. I love blind firing with a shotgun. I love executing people with a shotgun. If you play this game, just please use a shotgun.
The shooting's really good. The melee combat is fucking terrible. They ditched the fun melee combat system from the last game for no reason, and now it's just back to mashing one button. Just mash one button. It's not fun. It doesn't look cool. It sucks ass. So is there anything good about Mafia 3? Yeah, there are a lot of bright spots, actually. After perusing the user reviews online, the consensus among people who liked this game seemed to be that even though it's incredibly boring to play, it's worth doing for the story. The story in this game is really good, they say. So let's talk about the story. The first 2 Mafias were most notable for the tight cinematic stories they told. They were both linear games, and as such, the story was told in a specific order, as any great story should be. Mafia 3 is a lot looser in its structure, so the story needed to have a looser structure too. And it does start off incredibly strong, as I mentioned. It's all set within this documentary-style framing device, with people in the modern day talking about the events of the game. Mafia 1 had the framing device of Tommy recounting the events of his life to Detective Norman. Mafia 2 kind of started with Vito sitting in that room, writing in a journal and narrating, like,
The story of
my life is not for the faint of heart.
So I think the documentary thing is a really cool evolution of that format, but the way this story is structured, or rather not structured, really clashes with the documentary style. When people say the story in this game is really great, I think what they mean is that the cutscenes are really great. Well written, well directed, incredibly well acted, and they look fantastic. However, the overall story is kinda thin and pretty all over the place, so if this were a movie, like a standard Hollywood movie, you'd have the Mardi Gras heist as your big, extended opening action sequence, kinda like a James Bond or a Mission Impossible movie might start with, and it's interspersed with some brief flashbacks to establish the characters, detail the events that led up to that night. They successfully pull off the heist, go to celebrate at the bar, then things seem good, but then Marcano betrays them and kills everyone except Lincoln, who survives but is comatose. After a few months, he awakens from the coma, he's filled in on everything he missed and decides to take revenge on Marcano. Boom, that's the end of the first act. Lincoln then goes around and enlists the help of everyone else Marcano screwed over that night. Then they form a plan to take down the organization from the bottom up, and at this point in the movie, they would begin executing that plan, start off pretty successfully probably. We might even be hit with a montage showing how well things were going. Then a little later on, maybe the protagonist receives a new piece of information that challenges his perspective, could even cause a ripple in the group dynamic. This might then lead to the antagonist getting the upper hand. He might even kill an older mentor figure or kidnap one of the main characters, and it would seem like all hope is lost, and that would be the end of Act 2. But then the good guys would rally and team back up and form a new plan to take down the bad guy. So they'd execute the plan, maybe stumble a little bit, but ultimately achieve victory, right? And that would be a basic, satisfying story structure. But Mafia 3 ignores a key portion of what makes this formula work. That being most of the second act. Once our protagonists team up to form a plan, they kind of just execute the plan with very few obstacles, then they win. Because the way this story is structured, you can basically do the missions in any order you want, meaning it's impossible to actually establish events that will pay off later on. Outside of the events established in the first act, every other plotline that starts is very quickly resolved. And the DLC chapters take this utter lack of structure and flow even further. There are 3 separate storylines that, while not directly connected to the main story, they do take place during the main story. And, like most missions in the game, you can play them in any order you want at any point in the story, causing the overall narrative to become even more disjointed. The first DLC, Faster Baby, even though it's a complete detour from the actual story, it does feel very tonally and thematically appropriate. Unlike the next DLC, where Lincoln hits pause on his quest for revenge against the mob, and him and Don Johnson travel to a small island off the coast of Cuba to stop a Bond villain from stealing a nuke and starting World War III, and I've never heard of something more out of place in this famously grounded video game franchise. Could you imagine if there was a mission like this in the first game, like the Don pulls you into his office and he's like, "Tom, my nephew back in the old country is the leader of a resistance movement, and he's just been captured by Mussolini's people, and if he dies, it'll change the entire course of the war in Europe. I need you and Polly to airdrop over his castle late at night and land on the roof. Then, without being spotted by the guards, make your way down to the docks where you'll find a submarine, which I want you two to pilot down to the secret underwater base where my nephew's being held. From there, I want you to place the charges on his cell and blow off the door. Then the 3 of you will quickly get back on the sub and make your way to these coordinates on the surface, where Sam will be waiting to pick you guys up in a seaplane." No, that would never happen, because that's not what these games are about. There should never be world-ending stakes in a Mafia game. It's not fucking Super Mario Galaxy. Also, they lost a key ingredient of the first 2 game stories. In those games, you weren't some kind of hero trying to save the day or get revenge on an evil villain or stop some invasive force. You were just a bad person on a selfish quest to make your own life better, and you did bad things in those games. Sometimes they had you doing stuff where as the player you might get kind of uncomfortable, like, "Oh, I don't know if this guy really deserves to die." Mafia 3 drops all nuance and puts you on a righteous quest for revenge and wants you to feel good about the people you kill, much like a Ubisoft game. Because in Mafia 3, it's not going to be some scared kid from a rival family who's in over his head. Instead, 99% of the time, you're killing other criminals, racist-ass cops, the Klan, murderous cult members, evil terrorists, horrible sex traffickers, literal slave drivers, and overall some of the most vile motherfuckers on the planet. You're essentially an anti-hero, ridding the city of evil in an incredibly violent way. So while the quality of writing from minute to minute is well on par with, and at times exceeds the first 2 games, the overall story is by its very nature incredibly sloppy. Many of the great characters that are introduced early on are given very little room to grow as the story progresses. The beginning of the game, it seems like Vito, Burke, and Cassandra are going to be major characters with significant roles in the story, and they do in the sense that they're around and their presence is felt the whole time, but they never actually do anything to affect the events of the game. And this is because the open-ended nature of this game's structure allows for any of these characters to betray you at any time if they think they're being treated unfairly. So then you have to kill them, meaning they can't write any significant scenes for these characters because it's possible they'll already be dead at that point in the game. So they're forced to spend the entire story on the sidelines. So let's real quick talk about Vito and his role here. We find out that he got sent down south after all the business of Mafia 2. He has a side story in this game about trying to figure out if Joe is still alive because he heard some rumors that Joe might still be alive. Now, I can understand why Vito, Joe's best friend, would still be looking to see if he's alive. What I can't understand is that apparently fans were eager to find out what happened to Joe after the cliffhanger ending of Mafia 2, which is fucking stupid. It wasn't a cliffhanger ending. Joe fucking died. He gets taken away in another car, and Vito says, "Hey, what are they doing with Joe?" And Leo goes, "Sorry, kid, Joe wasn't part of the deal." And then the game ends. That means Joe died. Just because we don't literally see him get popped doesn't mean there's supposed to be any ambiguity as to what happened. And yes, we do see Joe alive and well at the end of Mafia 3, but that doesn't make it any less stupid. He was clearly supposed to have died at the end of the last game. They only brought him back because a bunch of fans on the internet misinterpreted that ending as a cliffhanger. This would be like if it was 2007 and you were going to see Spider-Man 3 and somebody said they were excited to find out what happened to Doc Ock after the cliffhanger ending of Spider-Man 2. Oh, I wonder what happened after he fell into the ocean with the nuclear reactor. I really hope Spider-Man 3 addresses that unresolved plot line. What was I talking about? The characters in Mafia 3. In my Mafia 2 video, I mentioned how none of the characters were very visually distinct from one another, and it sometimes made the story hard to follow. Luckily, that's no longer a problem with Mafia 3. What a fun cast of colorful characters. Every single person has a unique look that speaks to their personality and just makes the story more visually interesting. Like, you look at someone and you go, "Oh, who's that guy? He's got an interesting look. I wonder what his deal is." Even minor characters have a unique style that tells you a little bit about them. However, another big problem with this game is that you don't get to bond with the characters the way you did in the first two. Lincoln does basically every task alone, so all those moments of bonding with the boys in the first two games are basically completely absent. Going through so many harrowing situations with Polly and Sam in the first game and Henry and Joe in the second, where everyone's shouting at each other and saving each other from shit, it made your connection to those characters feel so much stronger when you're actually in those situations with them, and it makes the impact of those characters' fates hit so much harder. Plus, having someone for the main character to talk to during gameplay can help you get a better understanding of how they feel in a given situation. The only character you kind of get this with in Mafia 3 is Lincoln's friend Jack Donaghy, who's kind of an intense character, but also kind of a comic relief character, but I also don't find him funny. Nowhere near as funny as the funny characters from the first two games. There's one moment of his that made me chuckle, but I still can't tell if it was supposed to be intense or funny. I don't know. You tell me.
Where were you when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated?
I don't remember. At home, I believe. I don't remember. At home, I believe.
It just makes me uncomfortable because they give him this carefree attitude, but he's done and continues to do some horrible things and usually just laughs it off, which makes him seem like a major sociopath and not someone you'd want to be around.
What?
And of course, a terrifying sociopath can be a fun character in a game with a much wackier tone, but this guy just gives me the creeps. I also found most of the villains to be pretty underdeveloped. Aside from the main villain and the ones from the DLC chapters, every other antagonist in the main story is usually introduced at the beginning of a mission, then killed off at the end of that mission. Remember Mafia 2, where every antagonistic figure is introduced, then builds up some type of relationship with the protagonist, which then pays off in a meaningful way later on? In Mafia 3, it's just like, hey, here's this guy. The audience is introduced to him in one scene, then Lincoln kills him and moves on. He doesn't have any personal connection to these people like Vito did in Mafia 2. They're just obstacles in his path that are quickly disposed of and forgotten about by both the main character and the audience. The only real exception to this is Remy Duvall, who happens to be voiced by Nolan North. He's basically Tucker Carlson. He hosts a radio show where he discusses the importance of Christian conservative values and the slippery slope of civil rights. You listen to the radio a lot in this game and you hear Remy Duvall's show a lot. The whole game he's preaching about being a good Christian and that he's not a racist racist, even though everything he says is super fucking racist. Then it turns out he is indeed a member of the Klan. So you go to his Klan rally, murder everyone there, tie him to a cross, and set him on fire, and that's fucking satisfying. None of the other villains are like this, though. The reason Remy Duval was so interesting is because you hear him throughout the entire game, and you grow increasingly angry at this distant figure, and then when you finally come face to face with him, it feels like the culmination of established events. Now let's look at the other villains, like Tony DiRazio, for example. We're introduced to him, and we find out that he kills you if you don't have his money on time. Wow, what a fresh take on a mob boss. I wonder if... who cares? He's dead 5 minutes later anyway. And the best character in the game is Father James, but I realized that if you don't play the DLC where he's heavily featured, he's actually a fairly minor character with not much screen time, and it was the final DLC released, so if you played this game at launch or close to launch, chances are you missed out on the best character, and I don't know why you would have gone back to the game after playing it when the DLC... And also, this is kind of a minor complaint, but because of the era and setting, we don't get as many fun Mafia stereotypes as we did in the first two games, and they throw in a couple for the true fans. It's alright.
A lot of whoas in there. Probably face down a pussy right now.
I'm gonna give him an ass fucking. He's never gonna fucking forget. Bring him back fucking alive, that cocksucker.
My ma's bucatini recipe.
So now let's talk about Lincoln Clay, our main character. He has no personality. What are his personality traits? Stoic and noble. That's it. That's not how you describe a human being, that's how you describe Qui-Gon Jinn. Now, the best video game characters always need to be somewhat of a shell for the player to cast their personality onto. And if they have too much of their own personality, you can end up alienating the player and making them wonder why this isn't just a movie. But you can also alienate the player by making the character an empty husk that's impossible to connect to. And Mafia 3 went with the latter. Tommy from Mafia 1 was just a guy who was a bit in over his head. He felt pretty overwhelmed most of the time, but he had a strong desire to come through for his family because they always came through for him. In Mafia 2, Vito was a guy who was always destined to fall into a life of crime, and even though he knows he deserves better, he also knows he probably won't get it, so he's content with where he's at. Now, are these guys as interesting as Charles Foster Kane? No, and they never needed to be. They just needed a little something. We need to know how they react to stuff, how they feel about stuff, what decisions they might make in a given scenario. I don't know anything about Lincoln Clay. I never know how he feels about anything. How does he feel about just having single-handedly brought down the mob? How does he feel about the fact that he just secured a nuclear warhead and averted World War III? How does he feel about betraying Father James, a man who dragged his unconscious body from a burning building and nursed him back to health? A man Lincoln has known since he was a child and the only real father figure he has left. How does it feel to cut that man out of your life for such selfish reasons? How does Lincoln feel about racism? He's used to it.
Well, ain't like I've never been called nigga before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he is used to it. Everyone who faces racism is used to it. How does it make him feel inside? How does he deal with it? What thoughts run through his head as he's walking down the street knowing that some of the people around him hate him just because of the color of his skin? He's used to it. It's all we ever get. I mean, I can applaud Mafia 3 for being basically the only AAA game to ever dive headlong into the issue of racism. A lot of other games will scratch the surface but never try to say anything real because they don't want to upset the the racists that buy their video games. So good job, Mafia 3, for this. But when you're doing a story about race, your main character should have some thoughts and opinions on race, especially if they're a black man in the civil rights era South. But he doesn't. We never get anything. He's too much of a blank slate. He feels like a video game character. And not just in the way he's written, but also in the way he plays. Which leads me into my next point. Lincoln Clay is too much of a badass. When I first started seeing images of this game and I caught some glimpses of the main character, I went, oh, so they're going for like a more stylized look for the next Mafia game? Kind of like a Gears of War thing with big exaggerated characters and stuff? But it turns out no, just this guy's a Gears of War character. Everyone else looks normal. He's basically the Punisher, a huge badass who was in Vietnam. Then when he gets home, his family is killed by the mob, so he goes on a brutal revenge mission. He's the Punisher. It's the Punisher. I'm not the first person to notice this. Mafia 3 is the best Punisher game ever made, but that's the problem. Usually a video game will cast the player as someone who's more of a badass than everyone else in the game. Even in games that are set in a somewhat realistic world, you usually play as a mega badass. But that's what's great about the Mafia games. You just play as a regular guy. You're often less powerful than most of the people you're fighting, and that was part of the appeal of those games. But Mafia 3 has you playing as the toughest motherfucker in town with a crazy arsenal of weaponry. Yeah, I bet Tommy Angelo wishes he had a GL Korsky pump-action grenade launcher when him and Salieri got ambushed at lunch. Yeah, I don't think Dino and Lou would have been such a big problem if Tommy'd been packing a Hartman M60 machine gun, aka the big bad wolf of Nam. You think Vito would have gotten his ass beat so bad by Brian O'Neill if he could fight like Lincoln Clay? Look at this guy, he couldn't lose a fight if he tried. Nobody stands a chance against him. You can pretty much take down an entire operation with just punching and headbutting if you want to. Here's a mission where you have to fight people in a boxing ring, and here's me fighting the hardest guy in the game on the highest difficulty. Basically what I'm trying to say is that the game makes you feel like Batman. He's just the ultimate badass, nothing gets in his way. In fact, this whole game is about him having survived a gunshot to the fucking face. I guess he was shot in the one part of his skull where the bullet leaves nothing but a scar and no brain damage. Should have shot him twice, I guess.
2 in the head, Paulie.
But when I'm playing a Mafia game, I don't want to feel like the Punisher or Max Payne. I just want to feel like a regular guy who's shitting his pants every time he gets into a shootout. Not the Terminator confidently walking into a hail of gunfire. And while we're here, I want to address the lame outfits in this game. Mafia 2 had so many awesome outfits. Classy casual wear, dope mob suits, and a couple of silly ones. In Mafia 3, every single outfit is either bland, bad, or silly. And I did like the silly ones, don't get me wrong. The funny Jimi Hendrix outfit, the Magnum PI shirt, the Keegan-Michael Key one, but they really clash with the tone of the story. There was only one outfit in the game that didn't look bad, boring, or goofy, but where my outfits at? I want some dope 60s clothes. I want some of this. I want some of this. Give me some of that. Not 10 different army outfits. What a ripoff. The city of New Bordeaux, which is the city this game is set in, which is the city of New Orleans almost exactly. It does feel like a big proper video game map. Mafia 2 had a really small map, but Mafia 3's is basically the same size as the city in GTA 5. All the different neighborhoods and parts of town have their own feel. The French Quarter is the obvious highlight. There are a lot of little buildings to go into, bars and jazz clubs, restaurants sometimes, but you can't actually do anything or buy anything at these establishments. In Mafia 2, you could buy drinks at the bar, buy food at the diner, buy clothes at the clothes store, guns at the gun store, but all that interactive stuff is completely gone in Mafia 3. Now if you want to buy a gun, you call this guy and he pulls up in his van. He's like an illegal arms dealer and you can buy guns from him anywhere at any time, from way out in the bayou late at night to the middle of a busy street in broad fucking daylight. There's a lot of attention to detail put into certain parts of the map, but other areas feel a bit neglected. Usually when you're driving around, everything just has a general sense of ugliness. The game does look good sometimes. It can even look great when it's really trying, but it usually just looks brown and uninteresting. And as I mentioned, the AI is really bad. None of the citizens of New Bordeaux react to stuff in a realistic way. Alright. Now I will be selling the pumpkins. Oh, sorry. Sorry. It's my bad.
Coming through.
I'm just gonna get out of your hair. The only massive problem with this map is the lack of fast travel. The first 2 games didn't have fast travel, but that was fine because 1, they were considerably smaller maps, and 2, the story was completely linear, so you didn't really need to fast travel anywhere, they just had you being where you need to be. Mafia 3 has a pretty decent sized map, and the structureless structure of it means that you'll be frequently driving around all corners of the map, basically running errands. The only reason this doesn't totally suck ass is that the cars and the radio are awesome. This is the only area where the game absolutely crushes it, which is why I saved it for last. There's some sick fucking cars in this game. The hearse, which you can fucking trick out, Tommy Angelo's taxi, the weed vans, sports cars, muscle cars, race cars, military vehicles. They're all so badass to drive. Pulling off some sick-ass drifts and over-the-top stunt jumps. You need to play on simulation mode, obviously, but honestly, one of the most fun things in this game is to just cruise around and listen to the radio. Now in video games, you have good radios and you have bad radios. Then you have Mafia 3, which is on an entirely different realm. The radio in this game is incontrovertibly the greatest video game radio of all time. I'm actually insulted at the mere suggestion that any other radio could even compare to this. Never before has there been an in-game radio that almost exclusively plays my kind of music. There's always a banger on. Every second you're in the car is fun, even if you're just sitting there. Now unfortunately there is no Beatles on the radio, which I know would be really expensive, repetitive, but there are some huge songs in this game. You could have gotten 1 or 2 Beatles songs just to make it feel a little more real. And if you're wondering if the Beatles were on the radio a lot in 1968, real quick, get on your computer, go to www.google.com and type in "how do I enroll in kindergarten," because you obviously don't know anything. And it's not just the songs. The different radio stations that play do so much to flesh out the story and the world. Sometimes I was so enthralled by a segment that was playing on the radio that I wouldn't even get out of my car when I reached my destination. I would just sit there and listen to the rest of the story, then go play the boring video game. This game's radio is seriously the only thing that kept me playing through its incredibly repetitive loop. The radio, however, does have one major flaw, and that is the song "Fortunate Son," a song I used to think was pretty good, but after hearing it in every single movie, TV show, and video game that has existed in the last 30 years, I have grown to completely despise it. The second I hear in a soundtrack, it tells me that this is going to be a miserably bland, unoriginal product where creativity goes to die, and for the most part, that's exactly what Mafia 3 is. So to anyone still watching at this point, my final thoughts after having played through this entire game 3 times on 2 different consoles are that if you can look past what you wanted this game to be and what it could have been or should have been, and you can play it on a good PC or a top-of-the-line console, then you can somewhat start to appreciate this game for what it is. A bland GTA ripoff in a fun period setting with a great radio. But unless you were a huge fan of the other games, and you love the 1960s and New Orleans, and you have a high-end gaming rig, I'm sorry to say that I don't think Mafia 3 is worth playing. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hit that subscribe button. Please subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to subscribe.